This is hour 2 of Advanced Server-Side Scripting Lesson 3. We started playing around with NPM. We've been looking at how package.json works, how the NPM central repository works, and we've installed and we're using the Connect module. So we're able to launch a server, and we've got the sound of one hand clapping here. We can send requests, our server knows what to do with them, but we have nothing set up to actually issue a response. So we're going to modify our server.js so that we can handle a few different URL paths. And then we're going to also have a look at how do we install a package globally. So what I'm going to do here is we want to set up a request. So we're going to set up we're going to handle 3 URLs. One called hello, one called goodbye, and then one that's just our root path. So we're not going to create new physical web pages. We're kind of creating virtual web pages, and we're mapping each URL to one of our virtual pages. So I'll create a variable here called hello. And so then set it equal to an anonymous function with 2 parameters. Request. Actually, our Connect module has 3 parameters. It's got the request that comes in, the response we want to send to the browser. There's one other parameter which is called next. So that's in case after we're done handling the request and sending a response, we want to call some other function. So what this might look like, the response might be generate an email. So the response might be load a confirmation page, but then next we'll invoke an email confirmation. Let's say after someone signs up. We won't really use next for today. We'll create this anonymous function and we'll assign it to the variable hello. And in here, we'll just write res.and with hello. So we want to send back a response with the text hello. We'll take our Connect app, and it has a function called use. And what use allows us to do is connect a particular URL path to a function in our JavaScript. So here, if we get the request at localhost 3000/hello, we want it to run this function, which will print a hello message to the page. If we go to localhost 3000 with nothing on the end of the URL, we'll still see that same cannot get message for now. We'll fix that. But if we go to localhost 3000/hello, the page should say hello. Now my server is running here. So I get the same message at my root file. This time I want to try localhost 3000/hello. Let's see if it runs that function and prints the word hello to the browser. Chad, you're shaking your head. You're not optimistic. That's interesting. We got a cannot get. Well, let me give you a hint. There's nothing wrong with our code. Gerbej, what do you think? You did? Okay. Anybody else getting the cannot get hello? Aha. So in order to get it, can you repeat that, Gerbej? How did you get it to work? So press Control-C, stop the server. And now, if I just hit the up arrow to launch it again, Now my hello URL is being handled properly. Right? So what that means is every time we make a change, we have to stop the web server and restart it, which is not a really ideal situation at all, right? That's a pain. If we go to localhost 3000, we still have cannot get. Our server knows how to interpret that URL /hello, doesn't know what any of the other URLs mean. We still haven't provided any other instruction. So we want to set up some kind of handler for our root file. We also want to then set up a goodbye. So we go to localhost goodbye, and it'll print a goodbye message. So we're going to need 2 more functions in our server.js and 2 more URL mappings for the root folder, for hello, and for goodbye. Now, there's one other thing we want to do. Before we set up the other functions, so we can add those other URLs, we have an ability to set up our application so that we don't have to keep stopping it and starting it every time we make a change. It's a giant pain. It wastes way too much time. So there is an NPM package that will automatically restart our application whenever we save changes. So let's add that to our site. Okay. Do you get an error when you start it again? Okay, we got to read the error message because there's something wrong with the code. That's one other interesting feature. Notice, let's say I leave out a bracket here. I break something in my code. If I stop it and try to launch it now, notice my server won't even start. So Sugman, if you have something like this, this will tell you the error message and it'll tell you where in your file it is. That should help you to debug it. Okay. So, and same when we use that auto restart utility. If our server's running, we make some changes and hit save, and we break the code, the server will try to restart, but then it will crash, and we'll see that error in the command window. So the utility that we want, I'll go back to the NPM website. There are a number of these. The one we want is called NodeMon. Stands for Node Monitor Script. Now this is a development tool only. We don't need NodeMon in production because we're going to use continuous deployment from GitHub. So once we push changes to GitHub, those changes automatically will go to our cloud server. We may have time to do that today. I know we tried it in week 1. It didn't work because we didn't have that package.json. We need that in order for our stuff to run on Heroku. Well, today we have it, so we can probably publish it there later. So all we can do now, NodeMon, we're going to install this one globally. Why? Because it's not specific to just this website. We want NodeMon for all of our sites. Whenever we start our server and make changes, we want them to do an auto restart. So we're going to install NodeMon globally. Okay. And then it's not going to get added into lesson 3 node modules. It's going to go somewhere else because it's not local to just this project. We're going to use it every week. Okay. You can see how, again, 800,000 downloads in the last month. So this is a widely used package that we can use with a fair bit of confidence. So if your server's running, you can hit Control-C to stop it, or you can leave it running and just open up a second command window. Up to you. I've already stopped my server. So I'm going to run npm install -g for global NodeMon. So it'll grab the repository from GitHub, and the 10 dependencies will get installed along with it. And here's the path on Windows. It'll get installed into your username /appdata roaming npm. So any packages you install globally wind up there. So later on, we'll install things like the Angular CLI, so we can run Angular commands on any project from the command line. We'll install that globally. If you're a Mac user, your path will be slightly different as to where it goes. But notice if we look at package.json, NodeMon's not included because it's not our application code that requires this. This is just a development tool, right? Same if we look in node modules, NodeMon didn't get added to node modules because we installed it globally instead to our roaming npm folder. Now there's a few different ways we could use NodeMon. The simplest way is instead of starting my server, so far we've been starting the server by typing node server. This time, instead of using the regular node process, we want to use the NodeMon process. That way it will automatically restart if any changes are saved. So I can just type NodeMon and server. It should launch my server again. So notice it says it's watching all files and all file names. My Connect server's running. So we could go back to localhost 3000/hello, and it runs. But now let's try changing the file and saving a change. And we should see that NodeMon should automatically restart and show us the change if we refresh the browser. We shouldn't need to stop and start again. So if I just go back to my server, let's just add something into our message. We'll say, hello, this now restarts with NodeMon. I'll just add something into that message. You don't have to copy my text. Doesn't really matter. Just something other than hello. So I'll just shrink this a bit. So notice what happened in my command prompt. It shows that it's restarting due to the changes. And now I can go back and refresh my browser and my change shows up. So NodeMon will check those changes and do our restarts for us. So typically we're going to want to use NodeMon most of the time rather than the base node process, because node won't show us our changes unless we do a restart. I mean, this does a restart. We just don't have to do it manually. It's automatic. Sorry?
I mean, Connect package should have.
Connect is very low level. It's very low level. We'll use Express next week, which is much more robust, but it sits on top of Connect. But when we do the URL mapping in Express, it will be very similar. We'll use the .use so we can map a path to a particular file or particular function. Let's try a couple others. We did a hello. So now in here, we'll do a goodbye age. So again, we'll take our same three parameters. These parameters, they're built right into Connect, and we'll use those same parameters when we start working with Express. Now we've got a function pretty much identical to hello. So what should we do on line 23 now? Right now, this function exists, but it will never get called. It will never run. There is no way to run it so far. How can we tell our application, or what URL should fire that function? Yep, we'll do app.use. Yep, what URL would make sense to call that function. Yeah. We'll map a goodbye URL here. So now we have two URLs that we can handle. Hello, goodbye. NodeMon is restarted again. And now, not only should we be able to go to localhost 3000/hello, but we should also be able to go to localhost 3000/goodbye. So hello still works. Now we have two pages. We're going to do three more virtual, well, we'll do two more pages. We'll do another one that's going to basically be a JSON API. So we can look at how we could create an API and let somebody take a request in to us and we send them back a JSON document. We still, right now, if we go to localhost 3000, what do you get? Yeah. Right, still says cannot get. We should fix that. We should have something as a home page. So typically we'll call it index. And we'll repeat it one more time. So now we need one more app.use, but what should the path be? Okay, so let's try that. App.use/, so in the root with nothing else attached to the end of that URL. In this case, we'll map it to our index function, right? So we should get a, this is the home page response if there's nothing else after the 3000. So what's the benefit? Can you see any benefit of this, of us being able to specify those paths here? How is this kind of helpful? If we can define our URL paths, this offers us a few benefits. Yep. Okay, what else does this do potentially for us by letting us define the URLs any way we want to? Yep, we can use them in any folder. Yep. What else does it allow us to do? Yep, we can rewrite and basically allows us to simply create friendly URLs any way we want. There's no file extensions on them, right? So it's good for SEO as well, right? Because we don't have those extensions, and allows us to write good, descriptive, friendly URLs, and we have full control over those URLs. So we'll save that change as well, which should get NodeMon to restart one more time. And now at localhost 3000, cannot get is gone, right? We've now handled requests in the root. Looks good. We better just make sure that our other URLs are still fine. If I go to hello. That's a bit of an issue, right? At hello, it still says I'm on the home page. At goodbye, it still says I'm on the home page. Let's try something else. Let's try login, which doesn't exist, right? There is no URL mapping for login. How did we manage to do this? Is that?
Because it's the first routing option in the list, it's always going to hit the slash because that's
Right. All of them have a slash in it. So it handles this first, it goes to index and it ignores the others. So how do we fix this? Yeah, we'll just move it down to the bottom. So our root should go down here. Because, and this is an important point to note, Connect's going to process these in order. This is in order of preference. So we want that to be last.
How are we gonna handle 404 in this case?
Well, let's try it and see. Let's see what happens now. So home works, which is fine, but it was working before. That doesn't tell us much. Okay. Hello works. We can probably assume goodbye is going to work now. What about a URL that doesn't exist? The other thing we can do, so I mean, where's one that's not a great option. The other thing we could do is set up a 404 function. I think we could do that. In this case, let's actually write a 404 header so the browser knows it's 404. Actually, I'm not sure I can call my I don't think I can start my variable with a number. We'll have to call it not found. It'll allow that. So now at the bottom, if we specify no path at all, that should be our default. I think this is how we want to do it. We don't want to make this first or all requests will go there. And it will ignore all the other ones. We'll try it. We may have to tweak it a little bit. So with no path specified. So we're mapping all our URLs, and if we have none of the URLs listed, do that. We shall try. So home works. Hello, goodbye. That hasn't worked. Not sure if we could. I have to think about that.
If you do res.status, you can check the headers. And then, so you do that on the app.u. And then if you get a status of 400, you res.render your 400 view.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. When we use Express later, Express actually has a built-in 404 handler right here. You don't even have to write it. It's built right in. Just comment that one out for now. Let's also try see what it would be like if we were going to send JSON rather than sending a text response. Let's simulate a JSON API. In this case, instead of using res.end to send text, we'll call res.json. And we could create some kind of JSON object. This is giving me 2 JSON. We'll see if that. We'll try it like this. Our response is going to come back as a JSON object. If we get a request at /API, we're going to invoke our JSON response instead. We can give it a try and see if we get a JSON object displaying in our browser. We may have to change it a little bit. Okay. We'll try this instead. We'll just create a variable that's JSON, and then we'll return that variable. So this might be the result of a database query. We look up either a record or a series of records in the database, and we just return those back to whatever application calls our API. Interesting. All right. I may have to come back to this one. See if that works. All right. I'll have to mull why that one's not giving me what I want. So NodeMon is great for letting us do those restarts. Connect and later on Express is going to allow us to map URLs to different paths. So today we're just sending text responses to the browser. That's fine. What we'll do later is these things will instead load different views. So either be HTML pages or some other different kind of HTML template. And later on, those will be views with HTML and Angular. I'll have to kick this one around on the break and fix it. Just trying to do it off the top of my head.
Rich?
Yep.
Should you maybe be converting it to a string? Because right now it's formatted as JSON, and if you're sending it, you're like getting to your.
Well, it actually says this isn't a function. I've used it like a function. Interesting, it says it's not a function. It certainly looks like a function.
What if you use AND functionality and convert the JSON to string and send this response?
Sorry, say that again?
So we are using response.and, right?
Yep.
We are sending string, so we can do the same thing. We can use the response.and and convert the person to a string and send it back.
Try that. I'll have to mull that one over a little bit. No error, but we're still not actually getting the JSON we want. We're not quite there. Okay. I'm going to do one other kind of virtual page that we're going to make. I want to make a little calculator. So we're going to set up one more URL handler, one more function, but we're also going to need to install a couple of other, well, we'll need to install a couple of packages to make this work. So I'm going to leave this command prompt running. I'll leave it open. I'm going to open a second command prompt so I don't have to stop my server. If you do stop it and use the same command prompt, that's fine. So what we want to do is we want to write a page where we can pass in a value, a numeric value, on the end of our URL. And then we were going to take that amount. We want to calculate how much tax, how much HST at 13% would be, and what the total would be on that amount. And then we want to display all those values in the browser and format those as currency with the $ and round it to 2 decimals. So we won't get the whole thing done now. We'll just kind of maybe get it set up. But in order to do that, so we're going to want a URL that looks something like this. It'll look like this. We'll have a parameter called amount on the end, and we'll want to be able to specify a different number. So we need a package that will actually, we need a module that allows us to read those. Fortunately, that module, we actually don't need NPM now that I think about it for this, because that module actually ships with Node. We already have it. It's like the HTTP module. But we will leave this second command prompt open because eventually to format that stuff as money, there's no built-in way to do that with Node, so we'll use an NPM package for that. I'll come back, I'll just minimize that. So we'll just set up the function and we'll set up the route, and then maybe we'll take a break. And then we'll come back and we'll fill in the details. So in here, we'll create one more anonymous function with request, response, and next. So for the moment, this is what it will say, but it's going to say something different once we write the calculations. And then we need one more app.use command. So when we get a request at localhost 3000/tax, it will call this function and display whatever we tell the output of this function to be. So you'll need one more use command. Can go anywhere here, just make sure it goes before the index. So we should at least be able to hit that URL now without a cannot get error. We should be able to see the page that says tax calculator. So now if I go here, At least this response is being interpreted and handled by our Connect server. So far this page is no different than hello and goodbye, an index. Just a fourth copy of the same thing we've already done a bunch of times. Just before we break, any questions so far?
Why do you need to create this kind of virtual pages, complex pages?
Because you have to handle in Node, the Node server, with an Apache server, it simply, when you look for a URL, it simply looks for that physical file with that name in that folder. The Node web servers are much lower level. They leave it up to you. If we don't specify how to handle each URL and what is supposed to happen, then all we see is those cannot get messages. We're creating virtual pages for today just so we can learn how this part works, how the URL mapping works. Later on, next week, we'll build actual files for the view, but we need Express to do that. So Express will use this pattern, but instead of calling just specifying text responses, we'll use a different function called res.render, and that will load an HTML page. We'll do that next week.
In case they would use kind of Apache, so we actually.
But you can't use Apache for this. Doesn't run it. You can't do it.
Even like exports all this.
You can't do it. Apache doesn't know how to make sense of this. Right. So it comes with its own web server technology that's tied in and integrated with the language.
How would you use it in production?
Because cloud servers have their own servers that will run this. They will use Express and they will be able to serve these out. That's why most hosting companies can't run this. Unless they also have a cloud service, you won't be able to load your Node sites on most web hosts. You can only run them on cloud servers, on Azure, on Heroku, on Amazon, on DigitalOcean.
Is it usually more expensive? Maybe like
It totally depends on cloud services are billed. There's no fixed amount. When you get a traditional Apache server, you're paying $10, $20, $30 a month, right? Cloud services don't have that notion. They have a notion it's paid based on the amount of resources your site uses. So if you have 20 slow days and 10 busy days in a month, you'll pay more than in a month where you have 30 slow days. So the hosts charge you based on your usage.
Do many of the traditional hosting companies have the cloud?
No, most don't. Because the idea of cloud services is that it's scalable. It's designed to rapidly scale and adjust. So if you get a traditional hosting plan, if you have 100,000 concurrent users on your site, you may kind of hit the limits of that server performance and your site may really slow down, right? The only thing you can do is then buy a more expensive hosting plan when your customers start complaining and start paying more money every month, whether you're busy or not. The way that cloud services work is they have data centers. I mean, cloud services are expensive, so it's only the biggest internet players that can afford to offer them. The Amazons, the Microsofts, the Googles. They have data centers all over the world. So for example, Microsoft, a couple years ago, they had no data centers in Canada. They now have 3 of them. So they replicate your sites and databases across multiple data centers. So if you get really busy, your site gets really busy and the server is peaking out, they just replicate it on another server in another data center. And now it's being served from 2 places. You pay more, but you get that performance benefit. And then when your usage drops off, it scales back down. Okay, we don't need that data center serving it. We only need this one. So it's basically pay per use, pay on demand, but they auto scale according to use. So you're not limited by the physical constraints of what one server has available. That's the idea. But it's incredibly expensive to set these networks up.
So for Node.js, we need actually like cloud.
Correct. This won't run on anything else. You know, if you have like a GoDaddy or a HostGator account, you're paying $5 a month for, you can't build node sites and run them there.
But for a small user, there's no need to go.
For a small user, this is the cloud server's cheaper, right? Because if you don't have a lot of users, the amount of resources you'll use on an Azure or a Google or Amazon is small. So your monthly bill is actually going to be low.
Actually, the truth is a little bit different because my coworker had an Azure account. I obviously is a student, so he had a credits from MSDN account. They give $300 every month for him to spend, and every web app that they create in this class starts from $50 a month, and then add up as usage. So it's not that cheap. Like it's not for everyday usage. Like you need to be at least medium-sized company to afford something in Azure. If you have, I don't know. Because like if you can get a $50 hosting in GoDaddy or whatever, or cloud something, and you can get that thing for a year for $50, and in the Azure side you're paying minimum $50 a month.
Okay, fair point.
Azure's weird like that though. You look at something like what's the one in Toronto? I don't know. It's one of the hosts, and you can pick how much compute you want. So like, if you get $5 a month or $10 a month.
Yeah, and many of them you can set limits. You can say, notify me if I use more than this. You know, here's my limit. If I get to 80%, it's like your cell phone, they'll notify you and say your site's used this much, and you may incur more charges. And then you can scale, you can turn things off if you want, or scale them back.
Even when I got my bill from Azure, I didn't have that much on there.
But it was running constantly.
It was running constantly. Yeah, that makes sense in there, yeah.
DigitalOcean I was thinking on.
Right, DigitalOcean is